Hi everybody, it's Paddy here again. Welcome to another Feel Good Friday. This week I'm joined from London by Yannick Jacob. Yannick is the author of a great little book called Existential Coaching, and he also is an expert in the area of positive psychology.
So we look into why are some people more resilient than others? You know, what are positive emotions good for? What are the pillars of happiness and well-being? And what are these links in the business context to higher sales numbers and performance and less sick leave? We found strong correlations between employee well-being, for example, and higher sales numbers, more productivity, taking less sick leave, a better atmosphere at work, more trust from the customer into the company, more trust from the employee into leadership. Strengths are the things that energize us, the things that we would do even if we don't get paid for it. Often strengths come out in our hobbies or in the way that we are with people. Take a step back, look at the perspective, think ahead. What might there be that I could do? I've seen, I train a lot of coaches, and some of the coaching schools have adapted incredibly. They've taken all of their teaching online within a week or two, and it's working really well. Their business is thriving. There's people who responded to this crisis in a way that is value-based, that is genuinely heartfelt. They want to put something out there that helps people, and it's in demand, it's in need. People's needs changed, and there's a lot of stuff out there that people need to deal with right now. And you can think about, what does my business have that could offer value to the newly created needs that are out there right now due to the coronavirus? So taking these little minutes, whether that's, working with a coach once a month, or whether that's setting 10 minutes aside on a Friday to just kind of allow everything else to just not matter for a minute and think into the future of what might be some of the possibilities here.
So thank you, Yannick, for taking the time to come and have a chat with me today.
Yeah, that's your first paradox, positive psychology, and then written a book on existential.
Yeah.
They do go together quite nicely, but that's another topic perhaps.
So how are you doing, Yannick?
Well, I'm reasonably well in these surreal times. I think positive psychology helped, having worked through some of the bigger existential questions helped. And I'm blessed and grateful that I can keep myself quite safe, and that I work in a profession that is, I think, more needed now than ever. Mm-hmm. People need that space to think and grow, and a lot of people need to navigate their businesses in a different way, and they need to do things very differently in their personal lives and in their organizations. So there's a lot of change, and coaches are helping with that kind of change. So I'm part of me is fascinated and excited, and the other part of me is very human and just, taken over sometimes by the pain and the suffering in the world right now. So I have very mixed emotions, I'd say. Okay. I just want to talk about positive psychology. Just kind of break it. If we break it down, what is positive psychology? Because we can all do a bit of positivity right now. So you can just tell us what is positive psychology? Right, yeah.
To the business world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So positive psychology is, I would distinguish between two areas of positive psychology. One is the branch of science. These are academics and scientists, researchers that ask different questions to what usually scientists are asking. Because especially in psychology, usually we're asking what's wrong with people, how can we fix it, how can we get it back to baseline? Somebody's not performing, how can we get them to performing again? And positive psychologists ask beyond that. They ask what's right with people. How can we use resources and building on resources and strengths? How can we look at what's going well and what that does to people? So we look into, why are some people more resilient than others? What are positive emotions good for? What are the pillars of happiness and well-being? And what are these links in the business context to higher sales numbers and performance and less sick leave? So we use empirical data to look at some of these hypotheses, or some of the things there. Some of these ideas aren't new; they're thousands of years old, But we can now look at it using scientific research and get some data. And with data, we can initiate changes at organizational, at government level, because decision makers can say, oh, there's something real behind this. We trust the process of creating knowledge. So, let's use that. And then on the other side, there is a movement of applied positive psychology, people who use the scientific findings to apply them to people's everyday lives. And that can sometimes cross over into the kind of pop psychology section. And perhaps some of the research evidence gets cherry-picked and see, oh, yeah, I can use that and make it really engaging. So there the scientists have to, they get a bit cross sometimes. But there's obviously a lot of value in there. And I actually appreciate anybody who brings useful tools and interventions into people's lives in an engaging way.
Okay, so you mentioned there, so it's looking at what's working for people, so when we look at that in the workplace, say even at the moment, because, from talking to some of my customers and even myself, sometimes I find myself focusing on everything that's wrong at the moment, as opposed to, what's working right. What kind of advice would you give, say, to a business owner or a leader around taking the positive psychology approach?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy, and it's actually not just easy, it's natural to focus on what's wrong, because that's traditionally and naturally what helped us survive. There's a danger, there's something wrong, so we should be focusing on it because it might lead us to survive rather than to perish. However, we know now that there's a lot of things we can do and probably we should do. We found strong correlations between employee well-being, for example, and higher sales numbers, more productivity, taking less sick leave, a better atmosphere at work, more trust from the customer into the company, more trust from the employee into leadership, So when there's a couple of things we can do based on positive psychology findings that particularly leaders and managers can take on board. One is to embody those positive values. There's a lot of research around what are the pillars of well-being. Meaning has been found as an essential pillar of psychological well-being and an essential pillar of strength for an organization. The people talk about finding your why. And when you have a strong why, strong values, strong beliefs, a strong vision that people are on board with, then you can endure almost anyhow. If you follow quotes by Nietzsche and Viktor Frankl, for example. So if it's clear, and not just a section on your website, but if it's lived by what those values and what those whys are, then we can go through this kind of crisis. So in smaller corporations or smaller teams, that can be clear or it can be a bit elusive. But it's really important that people are clear on this. And if you're not clear, you can get clear by getting your team together and talking about it. There's different ways how you can do that, but I won't get into the details now. On a team level, if you haven't, it's really useful to pick your team or pick your people based on their strengths. So there's a lot of research in positive psychology around different strengths profiles, what people are naturally good at. Strengths are the things that energize us. The things that we would do even if we don't get paid for it. Often strengths come out in our hobbies or in the way that we are with people. And they're across the board. There's nobody with no strengths. There's just a particular set of strengths that's probably more useful in certain jobs than in others. If your strength is kindness, for example, and you're an analyst or an accountant who doesn't really talk much to people all day, kindness has to come out in very creative ways. But if you hire your people based on their strengths, and if you get the teams together, working together based on their different strengths and how they make sense, how they're built in harmony together, that's a really, really strong team. Another one I would say is optimism, particularly in these times. Optimism, not just as a positive belief in the future, things are going to be all right, the kind of traditional way of viewing optimism, but optimism as an explanatory style, as a way to make sense of something that's happening right now or that has just happened. It's not necessarily about me. It's not my fault. It could be external, So it's not that this is always going to be this way. This crisis is not going to last. It's going to last way longer than a lot of people like, but at some point it will be over, or at least there'll be a different crisis for a change. This is not necessarily to do with me not being capable to deal with anything in general, but perhaps I'm struggling to deal with this crisis in particular. So if we use that kind of way to make sense, and this is a learned skill, we can get into a more optimistic way of explaining things. And, you can work with a coach, or you can educate yourself on just notice how you make sense of things, whether that's often external or internal, whether that's global or local, or whether that's stable or unstable, whether it's lasting for a long time, or you think that's universal. So the last bit that I wanted to put forward is mindfulness. And a lot of people probably have heard about mindfulness. Mindfulness is technically a form of meditation, and there'll be people out there who's like, meditation, I'm not so sure about it. The research out there is overwhelming in terms of the benefits of meditation. There's a saying in the mindfulness communities that if you don't have 10 minutes to meditate a day, you should meditate for 20. Because it's quite clear from the data that the people who do meditate, they're much more productive during the day. Practicing the skill of meditation, which is basically focusing your attention. You choose where your attention goes. If there's a thought that's going to grab you and you just engage with it and it takes you somewhere else, then you're not focused on what you're doing right now. Getting into mindfulness is basically training that muscle of where your attention goes. So there's lots of stuff right now that's trying to grab your attention. How am I going to, keep my job? Or how am I going to keep my partner at home happy? How can I work from home while the kids are around? How can I focus on my work while somebody is screaming in the other room and maybe one of my kids got hurt? How can I not think about the potential devastating implications for my business right now and focus on the next step ahead? These are all things that kind of try to take our focus away from what we want to be focusing right now. So getting into a mindfulness practice, grounding yourself in the present, allowing some of these thoughts just to pass by and not engage with them. That allows us to be able to focus on what we want to focus on, and that's one of the best skills that anybody can learn ever, I think, to be in control of where your attention goes, because that allows us to be focused. And that allows us to focus on the next necessary steps without allowing all of the noise, some of it very important, but perhaps there's a time to deal with it, to distract you.
Great. So some nice simple stuff there that we can all easily do. If we apply ourselves, I suppose that's the big piece. You'd hear customers talking about surviving and thriving, and I'm hearing like a lot of language I'm hearing at the moment was, if I just get through this, we're just surviving. What does thriving look like, Yannick?
So thriving looks like going beyond just surviving, going beyond just dealing with the immediate dangers of what's going on here and, barely keeping your head above water. What you're trying to do is go beyond that. In almost every crisis, there's opportunity, and we can find it. And I want to be careful with putting that out there as something that you're going to have to do right now, because many people are going through a collective trauma here. And I don't want to put any pressure on people to be thriving right now, because some people are genuinely just busy keeping their head above water, and there's just no attention span left to look for opportunity in this devastating blow. So I want to put that in perspective. However, that said, there is a lot of opportunity once you get to that stage where you actually stop running from the lion and you have a little bit of time to look around, So I would encourage people to look at, okay, so how much of this survival instinct is actually real, and I'm literally running from that lion right now and I need to run as fast as I can. There's nothing I can do beyond that. Or maybe I'm running from the thought of a lion and actually I do have some time, maybe just little pockets here and there, when I can spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes to just kind of become still and look around, take a step back, look at the perspective, think ahead, what might there be that I could do? I've seen, I train a lot of coaches, and some of the coaching schools have adapted incredibly. They've taken all of their teaching online within a week or two, and it's working really well. Their business is thriving, you know. There's people who responded to this crisis in a way that is value-based, that is genuinely heartfelt. They want to put something out there that helps people, you know, and it's in demand, it's in need. You know, people's needs changed, you know, and there's a lot of stuff out there that people need to deal with right now. And you can think about, what does my business have that could offer value to the newly created needs that are out there right now due to the coronavirus? So taking these little minutes, whether that's, you know, working with a coach once a month, or whether that's setting 10 minutes aside on a Friday to just kind of allow everything else to just not matter for a minute and think into the future of what might be some of the possibilities here. There's tremendous value in that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Again, it's getting the time and taking the time in it. Yeah. So positive psychology, happiness, well-being. We've just finish up. Your top 5 tips for happiness. For more happiness in our life. What would you recommend?
Well, that's actually much easier than I certainly had thought, you know, and I think for me, they come out quite clearly. The very basics of health and well-being. If there's any kind of magic pill to it, there's no magic pill in it. But the things that make the most difference, according to research, is eat well, sleep well, exercise, meditate, and I would add, get a coach.
Right. Yeah.
I can say more, but I don't think I need to this. It seemed to be pretty clear.
That's it. Simple, practical advice. I mean, what's really interesting, from talking with yourself, Yannick, and talking with other speakers, it all boils back down to the simple things that, and sometimes we're getting caught up in our heads, and we're forgetting the basics, or we're probably coming up with excuses not to do the exercise because today was a busy day. I suppose and they're the days that we need to be doing the exercise, that we need to practice mindfulness. Yeah. Yeah,
I think it's right. It's easier said than done, these 5 things. You know, I mean, I struggle with exercise. You know, my exercise used to be with other people in groups, and that's just not going to be there. So the kind of social factor that used to get me out of bed and, or, you know, away from the workplace to do something. I hate running. So it's a lot more difficult for me to keep up an exercise routine, you know, but there are ways. This is where the coach comes in, by the way, because you can find ways of making that happen. Depending on how you've learned to eat, you know, there's huge baggage with everybody. You know, my dad always used to say, oh, nobody's starving in Middle Europe, like let the kid eat what it wants. And so I always got a bit on the side that I would like. So, you know, I didn't want to eat healthy. And, you know, I think my dad didn't want to put up more of a fight when he came home from a long day of work. So my eating habits were really bad for a long time. I had to work on that, you know, and you can learn to like healthy food if you're not into it. You can build healthy habits, you know, and they start with small incremental steps, you know, just a little bit. If you want to get into flossing your teeth, start with 1. It sounds ridiculous. If you want to get into meditation, start with a minute. Start with 1 mindful breath. Just notice what's going on right now. What am I sensing? What am I smelling? How does my bottom feel on the chair? How does my arm feel against my clothes? You know, just that 1 moment where you're being mindful and in the present. You know, that's already meditating. If you commit to a minute every day to do that, you know, soon it'll grow. Soon you'll get better at it. You know, so we can start building small habits. But if we make a commitment to do small things, they can incrementally grow and radically change our lives. And I've seen that from tons of clients. It's always fascinating to me how the very basics that should seem so obvious, once you actually talk about it and build some very practical steps and very easy to start doing things, how that can fundamentally change people's lives and well-being.
Okay, well, listen, great information there again, Yannick. So thanks a million for your time. Really, really.
You're welcome.
And as I say, if anyone wants to pick up a great book on existentialism, highly recommended from Yannick. So, Yannick, have a great weekend, and thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up soon ourselves.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Paddy, for doing this and putting this stuff out there. It's needed and appreciated.
Okay, thank you, Yannick.